Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing a truly evil team that I built for the Open Grade League. This team features arguably two of the most hated Pokemon in the Open Grade League, Aegislash and Morpeko teaming up. Pairing those two with a Shadow Primeape lead, and opponents just simply did not have enough shields for the damage output that this team provided. I'm going to be showcasing this team in the Preview Cup to start with. This is the cup where they are beta testing the new PvP system for Go Battle League. The new system is not finished by any means, but it was interesting to see what it looks like as a work in progress. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and let's take a look at this new PvP system. Hopping into game number 1, picking up a very negative lead, leading Shadow Primeape into Togekiss. I save switch into Morpeko, and my opponent immediately responds with Shadow Bug Bite Fortress. Bug Bites will inflict massive super effective damage onto Morpeko, but the good news is I should survive long enough to make it to a second Aura Wheel. That forces my opponent to fire off the Sand Tomb to grab my shield. An interesting thing to note about the new system is that you will always get damage registration error. So in this scenario here, the Bug Bite KOs, but the charge attack is prioritized first. That is an adjustment they've made with the new system. Now I send back in the Shadow Primeape, I farm up, and I believe I've done enough damage that a Rage Fist will actually be able to secure the knockout. Rage Fist connects, down goes Fortress, they bring back in the Togekiss, I bank close combat for later and send in Aegislash. In the back, my opponent has Shadow Quagsire, and this game is looking like a win. I'm already at the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball should just about pick up the one-hit knockout here. I change forms so much faster than in the old system. So it appears Aegislash is a lot more optimized for this new system, which is really nice. I put up the shield, change back into shield form, and now I get a diabolical charging farm down. Back in comes Togekiss, but the damage is unfortunately done. I'm able to make it to the Gyro Ball, switch back into the Blade form, take the one-hit knockout onto Togekiss, and that is a good game. We move to game number 2, leading Shadow Primeape into Morpeko, this time a very nice lead. And the Morpeko is not switching out, which is very good news for me. Unfortunately, as a Shadow Primeape, I even have to respect the Psychic Fangs here. It would just do way too much damage. I'm going to immediately undertap the Rage Fist, because even if they no-shield, I want the ability to just fully farm them down. Rage Fist does get no-shielded, nice call from my opponent, and now they send in Corviknight. I'm at +1, I'm just going to be going straight for the close combat. So I fire off close combat, shield comes up from the Corviknight, I farm up, switch into Morpeko, and get the catch and sneak of the Air Cutter. That is an incredibly important catch. They don't get the boost as well, and now Morpeko is looking to completely take over this game. Their energy on the Corviknight really does not do a whole lot. They go for another Air Cutter. Again, they do not get the boost, and now I can fire off the Aura Wheel. Aura Wheel is going to connect. That KOs the Corviknight, and now my opponent has a pretty interesting choice. Do they bring back in Morpeko? No, they bring in Araquanid. They actually catch the Psychic Fangs back onto Morpeko, and I decide that I'm just going to stay in here. I'm going to try and farm down. It ends up being a simultaneous knockout, and their Araquanid meets an absolute brick wall in my Aegislash. I still have quite a bit of energy on the Shadow Primeape as well, so at this point, even without the Primeape, I would still be in a completely winning position, because Aegislash is just so incredibly strong into Araquanid. It doesn't matter what Araquanid throws, Aegislash is just in such a commanding spot. I farm up, fire off the debuff Shadow Ball. Again, the form change is so much faster on this new system, which is really nice, and I'm right away going for Shadow Ball number 2. I feel very comfortable just staying in with the Aegislash, because if my opponent looks to overfarm, I get a bunch of Psycho Cuts, which generates way more energy than charging. I put up the shield, change back into shield form, and there's just nothing that this poor Araquanid can do. Araquanid will fire off a last second charge attack, but as a shield form Aegislash, I just simply do not care. They go for the Water Pulse, I make a third Shadow Ball, and this game is over. Turns out we didn't even need the Primeape energy. I do really appreciate that on this new system, the Aegislash changes form so much faster, so that way, it doesn't slow down the game as much. We move to the next match, picking up a pretty scary lead Shadow Primeape into Tinkaton. Tinkaton is a pretty big core breaker for this team. I'm just going to farm up and go straight for the close combat. Close combat is going to connect, and just like that, my opponent loses 90% of their Tinkaton. I send in Morpeko as the safe swap, they smite me with a Gigaton Hammer. I try for the farm down, I don't quite get it, and my opponent sends in for Alligator. They were trying to catch a Psychic Fangs, but I go straight for the Aura Wheel, and that picks up a clean one-hit knockout. They've lost their entire Tinkaton except for 1 HP. They just lost an entire for Alligator, whatever's in the back, and it turns out to be Jellicent, is going to have to sweep. I farm up quite a lot of energy. I have enough for a boosted Aura Wheel, but I'm going for the Psychic Fangs. By getting the shield with the Psychic Fangs, now I can switch back into the Primeape, and my opponent can no longer afford to no-shield the first Rage Fist. Due to that defense drop, a Rage Fist, even without a boost, will be able to secure the knockout. Jellicent goes for the Surf. The only thing I have to do is be very, very careful that I do not allow a catch. Rage Fist is going to be shielded. I just overfarm, watching for the catch. They don't end up going for it, but I'm just going to keep farming. At some point, they're going to have to switch. They go for the Surf. In comes Tinkaton. And I guess we found our first bug with the new system. What happened there? The camera pans back and forth. Jellicent to Primeape, back to Jellicent, back to Primeape. I don't know what happened there, but I guess I'll report that bug, and that's one of the things that they can get fixed. I guess that's why you have a beta test, is so you can find bugs like that, but that was very, very weird. Okay, we move to the next match. Speaking of weird things, why is there a Shadow Scizor on my screen? I don't know why a Shadow Scizor is here, but Primeape can always win Switch Advantage or force both shields. And if you can get 2 shields down, then Aegislash should be in a really good position to clean up endgame. I fire off the Rage Fist, Scizor no shields, and I should now be in a very good spot. In comes Furret. Unfortunately, I'm only able to make a Rage Fist here, and if my opponent's counting, they know this cannot be a close combat. And they are. Nice no shield. I'm expecting that they're on Brick Break on the Furret, so instead of sending in more Pekko, I actually send in Aegislash. Because even though Sucker Punch is super effective, Brick Break is going to be resisted. And even as the Brick Break lowers my defense and increases their Sucker Punch damage, I'm still just a shield form Aegislash, and Aegislash just really does not care about that damage. I'm going to try and make it to the back-to-back Gyro Balls. It's going to be close. My opponent at a 3rd charge attack. The speed of Furret. Very, very tough. I farm up, fire off this Gyro Ball, and now I'm at the back-to-back. Is my opponent going to invest a shield here and hope that the Sucker Punch takes the knockout? No, they do not. In the back, they have Altaria, and this game is over. I can guarantee the shield or huge damage with the Shadow Ball, and then up a shield, I can clean up the game with more Pekko. In comes more Pekko, farming up, firing off the Electric-type Aura Wheel. Aura Wheel, massive damage onto Altaria. Again, now that I'm looking at the Morpeko form change is a lot faster as well. There's definitely still work to be done here in terms of making the game feel smoother and less clunky, but I think they are off to a decent start overall. Unfortunately, after going 5-0 in the Preview Cup, I just ran out of opponents. I sat in queue for ages and couldn't find anyone else to battle, so for the remainder of these battles, it's going to be the same team played on the Legacy system. I do think it will be a bit of an interesting juxtaposition, showcasing what it looks like to play the same team on the new system and on the old system. In this matchup, I try and sneak a close combat past 2 shields, but unfortunately my opponent is just simply too wise for that. They're not going to let that happen. I farm up to another close combat, bait with the Rage Fist, throw 1 Karate Chop, and then transfer the Volt Switch onto Aegislash. Normally, I never save switch Aegislash, but in this scenario, I just wanted to use Aegislash to absorb energy. Sand Tomb is going to lower my defense, and now in comes Feraligatr. Even at -1 defense, a shield form Aegislash will very comfortably be able to survive the Hydro Cannon. So now, I can look to farm up, wait the turn to ensure the Shadow Claw lands, and then fire off the Shadow Ball. This covers me for if the Feraligatr somehow survives this. I wasn't sure if it was a clean knockout, but it turns out it is. We're able to take the KO. If my opponent brings back in the Fortress, I transfer the Volt Switch once again, this time onto the Primeape, and the threat of a close combat forces a Sand Tomb. So I'm pretty close to a move on Aegislash if I need it for later in the game, and now I'm going to bring in more Pekko and click No Shield. While Sand Tomb is super effective, I know that future Sand Tombs are going to do more. So I No Shield more Pekko. In the back is a Shadow Celio, and this game is over. Morpeko fires off the Electric Aura Wheel, picking up the one-hit knockout. My switch timer should be up, so I can send back in the Aegislash. And you definitely do notice a pretty big difference in terms of how long it takes the form change to occur on the old system versus the new system. Aegislash sits there for a very long time, knocks them out with the Shadow Ball, and we take the win. Hopping into the next match, leading Shadow Primeape into Unova Stunfisk. This is a pretty nice lead. My backline is incredibly soft to Stunfisk, so I'm just going to stay in with the Primeape and go straight for the close combat. People don't like to shield the first move because if you end up shielding a Rage Fist, then future Rage Fist will do more. So I'm able to land the close combat, and now I can CMP tie Rage Fist to their second discharge. This guarantees that I either get rid of the Stunfisk or get my shield back, and honestly, either outcome feels pretty okay. They end up shielding. I decide Shadow Primeape's done his job, so I'm just going to let the Primeape go, and instead, go for an incredibly aggressive, triple-resisted Thundershock farm down with more Pekko. Now, my Thundershocks are only doing 1 damage, but they're so low on this Stunfisk. My opponent pivots out into a Bug Bite Fortress, and Fortress is about to get shredded. Aura Wheel rocks the Fortress. Fortress does survive, but not by much. I'm already at a Psychic Fang, so now I fire off the Psychic Fangs. This is going to be debuffing their defense as well. I'm going to try and throw a few Thundershocks and then switch over into the Aegislash. So I farm up, trying to make a move, but that's a pretty catastrophic error. I should have always kept the Morpeko alive to reset the defense drop on the Aegislash. That's a pretty big error on my part. Sandtomb is going to debuff me. I get the full charging down. What do they have in the back? Well, I'll never know as they resign the match. Maybe it was a Carbink or something like that just really can't do anything into Aegislash. We move to the next match, picking up a pretty nice lead, Shadow Primeape into Jellicent. In this matchup, I like to farm up and throw on 7, because this way I can guarantee a shield advantage or force my opponent to throw an alignment. If they don't throw an alignment, I'm able to make Rage Fist number 2, and just like that, their first shield of the match is gone. Now, they have so much energy stored on this Jellicent, and I have a tough call to make. Do I decide to double shield, or do I let it go? I say, you know what, I'm double shielding the Primeape, because it looks like I can actually win 2s. I should be able to throw 4 more Karate Chops, double up on Rage Fist, and my opponent will not yet be at another Surf. So, they're going to have to deal with a Primeape that is at +3 attack. Rage Fist takes the knockout, they send in a Tinkaton, and this Tinkaton is getting one-hit KO'd. We saw how much damage a regular close combat can do. They're forced to put up the shield, and now I can send in Aegislash. Aegislash, very comfortable taking multiple super effective bulldozes. That is not going to be an issue whatsoever. They go for the first bulldoze. They do get the debuff. If only that mattered, though. To be honest, Aegislash is so fine. Aegislash tanks a Gigaton Hammer very comfortably. I'm going to farm up and go for the Shadow Ball. I don't know if Shadow Ball picks up the one-hit knockout here. They have taken a little bit of damage from the +3 Karate Chops, so I fire off the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball does take the KO. In the back is Wigglytuff, and it's just an Aegislash sweep. I love Aegislash so much. Gyro Ball, one-hit knockout, and that's a good game. We move to the next match, leading Shadow Primeape into Shadow Steelix. This matchup, unfortunately, is not nearly as strong for Primeape as one would like it to be. Steelix gonna stay in. They try for a close combat catch onto Corsola, but I'm able to hold on to that energy and instead send in Morpeko. I have a ton of energy stored on this Shadow Primeape, which is very helpful. Unfortunately, Morpeko takes huge damage from Power Gem. This matchup is not that comfortable for Morpeko, especially considering the fact that after the Aura Wheel, I'm unable to get a farm down. I'm gonna be forced to fire off all my energy. I really don't want to give a huge farm down to the Steelix because the Steelix already has 5 Thunder Fangs of energy, so after the Aura Wheel takes the knockout, I'm going to look to pivot back into the Shadow Primeape. In comes Steelix, I answer with the Primeape, and I decide to go for the Rage Fist bait. Rage Fist gets no shielded, what a call from my opponent. That puts me in a very awkward spot. I put up the shield, they go for the Psychic Fangs, in the back is Shadow Altaria. This is not what I was hoping to see. I farm up to the back-to-back Rage Fists. They respect a potential Ice Punch. This one, however, can only be a Rage Fist, so my opponent is probably going to end up no shielding, and they do. Altaria takes big damage, but they held on to that final shield, and that's very bad news for me as the Aegislash player. In comes Aegislash. They farm up a ton of energy, fire off Flamethrower, and I'm always going to be no shielding because I'm in the shield form. I'm just going to go straight for the Shadow Ball as soon as I get there, because I need to take advantage of the faster energy generation in Blade form. So I switch over to Blade form, Shadow Ball is going to be shielded. I'm taking a lot of Dragon Breath damage, but look at the energy generation. I now basically have another Shadow Ball. I put up the shield, that's going to switch me back into shield form, and I'm going to look to farm. In comes Steelix. Steelix getting closer and closer to a move, and I fire off the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball is going to take the knockout onto Steelix. Now it's going to be a race. Aegislash Blade form versus Altaria. In comes Altaria, and they outpace by one singular turn. Oh my goodness, what a close game. Altaria knocks out the Aegislash, farms down Morpeko, and unfortunately, we will lose that game. Hopping to the final match, we pick up the Dream Lead Shadow Primeape into Licky Licky. My opponent safe switches into Feraligatr, and I am very happy to stay in here and launch close combat. This damage will be devastating if my opponent decides to no shield. They respect it, just for a bad scenario to get worse as in comes Morpeko. Morpeko has such a strong matchup here. I can shield up the Hydro Cannon, overfarm by 1, and win charge attack priority. My opponent will know that this is never a matchup that they're ever able to win. They're just going to no shield Feraligatr, and Morpeko takes the knockout. I still have a lot of very healthy Pokemon. My opponent now sends in a Shadow Quagsire, and this is where things could be problematic. Shadow Quagsire has an amazing matchup into this entire team. Quagsire should look to overfarm and throw right before I make the Psychic Fangs, so I save the Morpeko and get the catch onto Aegislash. Aqua Tail really not going to do much. Unfortunately, Aegislash only has bad matchups remaining on my opponent's team. Quagsire banks a massive amount of energy, they send in Licky Licky, but this is a pretty big issue. Licky Licky now has 7 rollouts, 1 away from the back-to-back Shadow Balls. Shadow Ball is going to connect, I go for the Gyro Ball, and now I'm at the back-to-back moves. This Gyro Ball, unfortunately, will not take the knockout, and my opponent should be under-tapping the Shadow Ball. So I pivot out, and I get the catch onto Morpeko. Morpeko is going to be resisting Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball lands, Morpeko survives, and I'm able to fire off the Psychic Fangs as they send in the Quagsire. Unfortunately, Quagsire does win charge attack priority over the Aegislash, and that's going to force me to burn my final shield. So I send in Aegislash, I put up the shield, they go for the Mud Bomb, so that would have taken the knockout, and now I can secure the KO as I fire off the Shadow Ball. The unfortunate news for me is that I'm getting outpaced by Licky Licky. They'll make the Body Slam before I make the Gyro Ball. I farm up, go for the Body Slam catch, they don't fall for it, they overfarm with the Licky Licky, and this is going to be a Shadow Ball. Shadow Primeape is many things, but it's not bulky. Shadow Ball takes the KO, in comes Aegislash, I lose charge attack priority, and the game comes down to this. If it's a Shadow Ball, I lose, but it's a Body Slam, and we found a way to win. We're so weak to Quagsire, but we made it happen, catch after catch, saving energy, rebanking it for later, down goes Licky Licky, and that's a good game. So now some final thoughts on the team as a whole and the new system. The team was built in about 5 seconds. I just wanted to run 2 Pokemon that form changed to test them on the new system. And then since I couldn't use a third Pokemon that form changed Mimikyu, I decided, you know what, we'll just put Shadow Primeape on the team. And somehow the team went 12-3. The team went insanely positive, more positive than it ever should have. Is this a climbing team? I would say probably not, just because it is very, very weak to Pokemon like Wigglytuff. However, this team just kept winning for some reason, so I don't really know what to make of it. I don't think I'd recommend it as a top climbing team, but I did have pretty incredible results with it. Although Aegislash, what I always say is it's a very skill-intensive Pokemon. It's a very difficult Pokemon to use, but it is a very powerful one. Enough yapping about the team, though. What we're here for is to talk about the new system. And well, when it comes down to the new system, honestly, I feel like there's some good, but there's also some bad. I feel like the game mechanically worked pretty well for me across the battles that I did with it. I will say the game feel, it felt almost a little bit sticky at times. And I feel like that's kind of a difficult thing to put into words, but it didn't have the smoothness of the old system. And I imagine that's one of the things that they're trying to work on with this beta test, is get feedback from the players on how the new system feels and the things that they can do to adjust it. I only really noticed one big error in the game when the camera ended up like bouncing back and forth 4 times between Jellicent and I think it was Primeape at that point. So there was some weirdness with the camera in one of the games, and overall, it could definitely be smoother. The game mechanically ended up playing pretty well. Like, the damage registration error appeared to be consistent, which was one of the goals of the rework. So it definitely feels like the work in progress that they mentioned that it was, and overall, I think it's trending in the right direction, which is good. There's still work to be done, and I'm happy that people are able to provide feedback to the devs on this, and that they're listening to feedback, because it's not something they've done a lot of in the past, is actually listening to player feedback. So I'd say cautiously optimistic that this new system will end up working out, and once it's fully debugged and ready to go, it's going to be an improvement over what we have now. At least that is my ardent hope. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the channel by leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated, so thank you guys so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.